All right. So if you got to this part of the lesson, you are going to need to get this note sheet that you're looking at on the screen from me. So if you don't have it, just raise your hand and I'll come give it to you. We are going to take notes about one of the most important things, grammar topics that we've learned the whole year. Basically one of the most important things of the whole year. So as I go through this, write down what I write down, and then after you are done taking the notes, raise your hand again. I'll check that you took them, and then you can move on with today's lesson. Okay, so what we're going to focus on is this word right here, this C word, conjugating. We're going to learn about how to conjugate verbs, which a verb is an action word like run, sleep, walk, talk. We're going to learn how to conjugate verbs in what is known as the present tense in Spanish. English also has a present tense. An example of a verb or an action in the present tense would be like saying like I write, I read, I talk. Those are examples of the present tense. So you may have seen me use this C word right here, conjugating, before. I'm not sure if I've used it with you guys, but basically what this word means is when you conjugate a verb or when you conjugate an action, that is talking about the process of changing the letter endings. Changing the letter endings on a verb in order to change who does an action. And this first section of the notes might not make that much sense at first, but hopefully as we go and once you get actually doing the practice, it'll make more sense. So yeah, conjugating is when you change the letter endings on a verb in order to change who does the action. So in Spanish, there are actually 3 types of verbs. There's 3 different types. These verbs are AR verbs, there's also ER verbs, and there are IR verbs. And you may be wondering, why are they split up into these 3 different categories? AR, ER, IR. Here's why. Here I'm going to write an example of an AR verb. Hablar is an example of an AR verb, and it kind of got cut off a little bit right there. But hablar, which means to talk or to speak, is an AR verb because it ends in the letter AR. Okay? An example of an ER verb is, I'll write it up here, comer. Comer means to eat, and we know it's an ER verb because it ends in the letter ER. An example of an IR verb is vivir, which means to live. And we know this is an IR verb because it ends in the letter IR. So that's why they have the different names, because they end in the letters AR, ER, and IR. Okay? The most common type of verb in Spanish is actually the AR verb. There's a lot more AR verbs than ER and IR. All right. And then you also see down here, it says infinitive verb. So an infinitive verb is basically just a special name that they give to a verb that still ends in the letters AR, ER, or IR. So if you ever see a verb in action, like these 3, that still end in the letters ER, AR, or IR, that verb is considered to be in its infinitive form. So when a verb's in their infinitive form, they translate to English like this. They translate to English as to blank. And the blank is whatever the action is. So for example, comer ends in an R still, so it's in its infinitive form. And it ending in ER, if we were to translate comer to English, it would translate as to eat. Same thing with hablar, to talk or to speak. Vivir, to live. Yeah. So if it ever still ends in the AR, ER, or IR, it's in the infinitive form, and it translates to English as to whatever the action is. Okay, now I'm actually going to teach you the steps to conjugate. And remember, conjugate is changing the letter endings on the end of a verb, an action word, to change who is doing the action. I'm going to teach you the 3 easy steps to conjugate a verb in the present tense in Spanish. Step 1, remove the letters AR if it's an AR verb, ER if it's an ER verb, or IR if it's an IR verb. So that's step 1. Take off the letters AR, ER, IR. So for example, if I was trying to conjugate the verb hablar, to talk, step 1 of conjugating it would be to get rid of this AR. And then you're left with this. What's left after you take off the AR has a name actually. It's called the stem. The stem. So step 1, take off the AR. Or if it was an ER verb, like comer, to eat, step 1 to conjugate this verb would be to take off the ER, and we're left with COM. Or if it was an IR verb, if we wanted to conjugate vivir, which means to live, step 1, take off the IR, and you're left with viv, V-I-V. So that's step 1. Pretty easy. Step 2. For step 2, you need to determine who is doing the action. And you need to then find where that subject pronoun is located in the chart. And you may be wondering, what chart? I am going to draw the chart right here. So you may remember, we've seen this chart before. If you don't remember, we're going to take notes about it again right here. So, this chart is important because we have to know where the different subject pronouns are located in this chart. So if you forget, subject pronouns are words like I, you, he, she, we, they, those kind of words. And we have learned them, but I know some of us struggled a little bit with them, but they are coming back when we're learning about conjugation, so we need to refresh. So if you remember, yo means I, and that goes in the top left. Where these words are, where these subjects are in this chart never changes. They are always going to be in the same spot. So yo, I, is always going to be in the top left. And then down here we got tú, which means you, and you, this is the familiar you or the friendly you. You use this one when you're talking to a friend. And then down here in this other box we got él, ella, usted. So él is he, ella is she, and usted is you, formal. So you use usted when you're talking to someone that you want to show respect to. And then in the top right we got we. There's 2 we's. We got nosotros. And we also have nosotras. Sorry, my handwriting is kind of bad. It's hard to write on here. And then for the sake of making things easier, we are just going to write an X through this box. This box is where the Spain form, or the Spain subject pronoun, vosotros, which is you all in Spain, where this X is in the box I just drew, that's where vosotros would go. But I'm not gonna make you learn vosotros because I personally don't use it, but I did want to teach you about it at first just so you're aware it is something that exists. And then in the bottom one we got ellos, ellas, and I'm running out of room here, but usted, ustedes. So ellos, sorry, handwriting is bad. Ellos, this is an O. Ellos is they, masculine. Ellas, they, feminine. And ustedes is you all. Sorry, I got cut off right there. So ellos is they, masculine. Ellas is they, feminine. And ustedes is you guys or you all. Okay. So those are the first steps. The first 2 steps. Let's recap. So step 1, remove the letters AR, ER, or IR, depending on what kind of verb it is. Because remember, there's 3 types of verbs in Spanish. Step 2, you need to figure out who's going to be doing the action. Is it going to be I do it, you do it, he does it, she does it, whoever it may be. And you need to know where that specific subject is located in one of these charts. All right? Let's move on to the final step. All right, final step. Step 3. Using the subject pronoun chart, which is that chart that we just drew on the last page, you need to go to the same spot. Go to the same spot in the verb endings chart, and you do this to determine what letters you need to add on to what was left of the verb after you took off the letters AR, ER, and I. Sorry, I got cut off again. Okay, so recap. Step 3, using the subject pronoun chart, go to the same spot in the verb endings chart. And you may be like, what is the verb endings chart? I'm going to draw them for you here in a second. And you need to figure out what letters you need to add on to what was left of the verb after you took off the AR, ER, and IR. And that might not make that much sense at this moment. So let me show you the verb ending charts, and then we'll actually practice a little bit. So the 3 types of verbs, AR, ER, and IR, they all 3 have their own verb endings chart. And a verb endings chart is just a chart that shows you what letters you need to add on to the end of what was left after we remove the AR, ER, and IR to change who's doing it. So we'll do our chart for AR, our chart for ER, and our chart for IR. And since I'm such a good teacher, you guys actually kind of already know the endings. You may not know that you know the endings, but a lot of you guys actually already know some of these. So, remember, in these charts, the subjects, different subjects are always going to be in the same spots. So in the top left on all 3 of these charts is the I form. So yo. Verbs in the I form always end in a specific letter in the present tense. And this letter is an O. So I'm going to fill that in all 3 of my charts. An O. Alright, let's just focus on the AR one for now. So in this second spot under the O is where we have the tu or the you form. In Spanish, the tu form in the present tense always ends in the letter S. However, since this is an AR verb, we have to add an extra letter before the S. What letter do you think it is because it's an AR verb? If you guessed an A, you're right. So we're going to add an A before the S because we're working with an AR verb. Alright. For the he, she form or you formal form, it's just going to be an A. Alright. The we form in Spanish, in the present tense, always ends in the letters M-O-S, no matter if it's an AR verb, an ER verb, or an IR verb. However, since we're dealing with an AR verb here, we have to add an extra letter before the M-O-S. And that letter is an A. Alright, you can put an X through that box. That's the Spain form. I'm not going to show you that right now. Alright. We've learned this next one. We've been pointing it out, or I've been trying to point it out to you all year long. If a verb's in the they form, if they are doing the action, like they yell or they cry, the verb is going to end in the letter N. But, again, since this is an AR verb, we're going to have to add an extra letter before the N. What do you think the letter is? If you guessed an A, you're right. Alright, so those are the endings, the verb endings for AR verbs. Let's move on to ER. ER is almost exactly the same as AR, but everywhere that we had an A in the AR verb chart, we're going to replace those A's with an E because now we're dealing with ER verbs. So we got an O for the yo or the I form. We're going to add an E. We're going to replace the A with an E, so ES. Instead of an A, we're going to have an E for the he, she, you formal form. Instead of AMOS, we're going to have EMOS. You can skip this one. Instead of AN, we're going to have EN because it's an ER verb we're working with. Alright, IR verbs. IR verbs are copycats. IR verbs basically copy this and have the same exact endings as an ER verb. So the I form is O, the U form is ES, the he, she, you formal form is E. All right, here's the only difference. I put a little star here to help you remember. Instead of EMOS for IR verbs, this is the one time they actually have an I. It's actually going to be IMOS here. IMOS. So that's the one time they have their I, since it's an IR verb. Skip this box, and this one is going to be the same as an ER verb too, EN. All right, now let me show you how this actually works in practice, like when we actually do it. So flip over your note sheet and write what I'm writing on the back of your paper. So let's say we want to conjugate the verb. Well, actually, I don't want to do hablar, to talk. I want to do something different. Let's do llorar, to cry. Llorar. Let's conjugate llorar for our different subjects. So I'm going to draw a little verb chart here. Okay, step 1 to conjugate a verb. Step 1, you need to remove the AR, the ER, or the IR. In this case, we're dealing with an AR verb because it's llorar, ends in AR. So we're going to take off llorar, and by take off that, I mean we're going to take off the AR. And after we take off the AR, we're left with llor, LLOR. You can fill that in all your boxes. So write what was left after you took off the AR in all your boxes. We're going to skip this one because that's the Spain version, and I won't make you do that one right now. Okay, that was step 1. Step 2 is determine your subject. Well, since we're filling out the whole chart here, we're going to do all the subjects. And then step 3 is where we have to add the right letter endings to change who's doing the action. So, for example, remember, I form is always in the top left of the chart. If I want to say I cry, what letter do I have to add on to the end of what I have here? Say I cry, lloro, with an O on the end. I cry. All right, to say you cry, in the second box, you form always ends in the letter S, but since llorar is an AR verb, we have to add an A too. Lloras, you cry. All right, for the he, she form, you just add an A back on for AR verbs. Llora. If it was an ER verb, you would just add an E. If it was an IR verb, you'd also just add an E. All right. We verbs is we's the top right. We verbs always end in MOS in the present tense. But since it's an AR verb, we have to add an extra letter before the MOS. And it's going to be an A. Lloramos. Lloramos is we cry. And then the last one, they verbs always end in the letter the letter N. And this can also be for the you guys or you all form. But since we're working with the AR verb, llorar, we have to add an extra letter before the N. And that letter is going to be the letter A, because it's an AR verb. So we just conjugated llorar to cry in all the forms. So we got lloro, I cry. Lloras, you cry. Llora, he, she, or you formal cry, or cries. Lloramos, we cry. And lloran, they or you all cry.